Okay, Mataji, shall we begin?
Yes. Hare Krishna, dear devotees. Thank you for coming for our next class on Srimad-Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 6 today. So before I begin this chapter, I'd like to recap a little bit of what we've been covering so far. It's a really fascinating sequence of events that's been happening since Chapter 1 of Canto 1. So the first three verses of Canto 1, Chapter 1, is actually a prelude to Srimad-Bhagavatam, which defines the absolute truth. It glorifies Srimad-Bhagavatam and invites everyone to relish Srimad-Bhagavatam. And that's covered in first three verses, actually. It defines the absolute truth. It glorifies Srimad-Bhagavatam in the second verse. And in the third verse, it invites everybody to relish Srimad-Bhagavatam. Then the actual starting text 4, the actual scene was described. The story begins, and where the sages are asking 6 questions. In that section, Sutta Goswami is described and glorified. And what were these 6 questions? The first 2 questions were, what is the ultimate good for all people in general, and what is the essence of all scriptures? The answer, Sutta Goswami explains, is Bhakti Yoga. And he elaborates by giving the 9 stages of Bhakti and how Bhakti can be performed for Krishna only and no one else. Now, the third question was, how did Krishna appear? And the answer to that was to reclaim the souls who are in the mode of goodness. And fourth and fifth questions were about the Purusha avatars, the Leela avatars, and the sixth question was, where did Dharma take shelter after Krishna left this planet? Now, all these questions were answered in chapter 3. Now, in chapter 4, the sages ask another 3 questions. They want to know the history of Srimad-Bhagavatam. And they want to know, that's the first question. Then the next question they want to know was about the hearer, Pariksit Maharaj. And then the last question about the speaker, Shukadeva Goswami, and how they met at the bank of the Ganges. Now, Sutta Goswami begins to answer these questions by explaining how Vyasadeva divided one Veda into 4 and made some of his disciples in charge of these 4 Vedas, and their disciples and grand disciples expanded it further. Now, Vyasadeva also wrote the Upanishads, Mahabharata, and many such literatures. But even after writing so much, he was not satisfied. And as he was pondering and reflecting about this, Narada Muni came. So in chapter 5, Narada Muni enters and he diagnoses the reason for Vyasadeva's despondency by saying that Vyasadeva had overemphasized the 4 principles of religiosity and not sufficiently and repeatedly glorified the Srimad-Bhagavatam or Bhakti Yoga. And then he goes on to glorify Bhakti Yoga in several verses, and then he gives the example of his own life. And part of that description of his life was given in that chapter, in chapter 5, where it was explained, he explained how he was the son of a maidservant who did his mother did menial work at the ashram of the sages. Now, these sages, they were visiting during the 4 months of the rainy season, and in their association, Narada Muni heard confidential knowledge of devotional service, and he ate their remnants. By doing that, his devotional service became intensified, and he got purified from all anarthas. And in text 16, it talks about how he went through all the stages of bhakti in the association of the sages. Now, in this chapter that we are covering today, which is chapter 6, which is called the conversation between Narada and Vyasadeva, we are covering, we will be covering how Vyasadeva asks Narada Muni to please describe the remaining part of his spiritual journey. What happened after he got initiated by the sages and they left the ashram to travel and preach? So it's a very amazing, exciting journey here, starting from chapter 4 to chapter 6 of Narada Muni's life. And so it becomes a very wonderful, practical way of seeing how one can develop bhakti. And it becomes like a real life situation to explain for our children. It becomes real for them. Otherwise, theoretically, if we were to explain, how one can progress in a spiritual life, it's very, very difficult. But here is a wonderful, fascinating story of this great personality, Narad Muni. So I will begin by reading the translation of the first verse, the Sanskrit and the translation of the first verse, and I will begin our PowerPoint in that way. Sutta uvacha ivam nishamya bhagavan devarsha janma karma cha bhuya prapacha tam brahman vyasa satyavati sutta. Sutta said, O Brahmanas, thus hearing all about Narada's birth and activities, Vyasadeva, the incarnation of God and the son of Satyavati, inquired as follows. So in the first 4 verses, Vyasadeva asks 3 questions. First question was, what did you do? What did you do after the sages left? Second question was, how did you pass your life after initiation, and how did you get this body of Narad Muni? So remember I said how the sages were there only for 4 months of the rainy season, so they left. So what did Narad Muni do after they left? Because he had become very, very attached to them. And how did he pass his life after that? And the last question was, how do you still remember your previous birth? In other words, he's telling he's Narad Muni at this present time when he's speaking to Vyasadeva, and he's telling about the story of his previous birth, which was a long time before, millions and millions of years ago. So his question is, how do you remember still your previous birth? So now these questions actually are very, very meaningful, because Narad Muni was initiated by these great Bhaktivedantas. And that is very important, and we can see that in our own life. But what do we do after our initiation is what more important. In other words, making vows is good, but then we have to try to follow them, follow our 4 regulative principles. We have to serve the Vaishnavas in the mood of a servant. We have to chant 16 rounds of Mahamantra every day. So it's a nice point to discuss with the children is how Narad Muni, when he got the training, how did he apply that training? And in other words, and we can help our children understand this point by bringing in other examples. For example, the story of Prahlad. He received the instruction from Narad Muni when he was just in the womb of his mother. And later on, by those instructions, he instructed his friends, who are all demons, children of demons, while his teachers had gone for lunch. So he applied those teachings, not only in his own life, but in instructing others. And after hearing that philosophy, his friends asked Prahlad, now where did you receive this knowledge? Because after all, you're like us. You're also a demon by birth like us. So there's more examples like that we can bring in. And if they don't know the story, we can actually, in a summary, we can tell them the story. Of course, a very nice example would be Prabhupada, how his disciples would ask him personal questions of their spiritual master. And Prabhupada would give his life story in order to inspire them. Now, it is said that Ram and Lakshman asked the same questions from the Vishwamitra, who was giving them knowledge of the weaponry, of weapons. And they also asked the same question. So in the same way, Vyasadeva is asking. Why? Because he wants to learn from his spiritual master. He wants to learn through his life story. So now, another point that can be raised here is that why would great souls want to reveal their mistakes or their shortcomings or their struggles? Why would they want to do that? Are they not going to worry about their fame being tainted? Why would they want to disclose some of the mistakes they have made? But this is the mood, we can explain that how this is the mood of spiritually enlightened people. People who are not advanced, they hide their mistakes, but not advanced souls. So when the need arises, they don't hesitate to explain. So in the same way, we see an example in Vyasadeva life, how in the 4th chapter, he reveals his despondency. He clearly says that how he feels so lacking, his limitations. And in the 5th chapter, he understands from Narada Muni how he has not sufficiently glorified the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This means really that Srimad Bhagavatam is starting with the mistake of the author. But Vyasadeva did not hesitate to put the 4th chapter in the Srimad Bhagavatam to reveal his mistakes. And Narada Muni does not hesitate to give his growth in Krishna consciousness in this chapter that we're going to hear. As well as we've heard a little bit earlier as well. For example, the other interesting point is that in the 7th canto, in chapter 15, Narada Muni actually gives his past life. Where he was cursed. Actually, he was cursed by Brahma to become a Gandharva. When he refused to get married, and he simply wanted to do kirtan and glorify the Lord, then Brahma got really upset and he cursed him to become a Gandharva for a whole kalpa, which is a long time. And then, so one time, he was actually the chief of the Gandharvas. And one time he went to a Sankirtan festival, which was organized by the Prajapatis. And he went there with all his girlfriends. And they were all singing cinema songs in different wrong tunes and things. And so they cursed him that you become a maidservant's son, a Shudra. So this is how Narada Muni shares his. So he, in other words, he doesn't hesitate to share his past life, which was quite, a fall down, right? But yet, why is he doing that? Because the idea is to teach those who are following important lessons in life. So here in this chapter, in text 3, actually, Vyasadeva is not inquiring about the perfected state of Narada Muni, but rather he's inquiring about his sadhana state, his practicing stage, in which there are struggles, in which he faced a lot of ups and downs. So the point is that when a great soul shares this, then that's his magnanimity and his compassion. And he's not fearful of the loss of fame. Another example is Pariksit Maharaja, whose mistake was mentioned in the 1st canto. And how he, due to his hunger and thirst, when he was out hunting, he became very hungry and thirsty. And he came into this ashram of Shamika Rishi, and he, because Shamika Rishi was deep in meditation, then he threw this dead snake that was lying nearby around his neck, just out of irritation and anger. And that was a mistake on his part. And this led to the cursing of Pariksit Maharaj that he would die in 7 days. Okay, so again, Pariksit Maharaj mistake was revealed, and he fully accepted that mistake, and he took the consequences of that mistake. And he saw it actually as the great plan of the Lord. In the same way, the story of Chitraketu, wonderful story, is also mentioned about his mistake, how he laughed at Lord Shiva when he was giving a discourse to all the sages, and he had Parvati on his lap, and so he laughed at him, and so he was cursed to become Vritasura. And he accepted that. So in this way, we can see that how Srimad-Bhagavatam is actually stories of great fall downs of devotees. But what's important is to learn from these stories that they teach us is how these great souls came out of these fall downs, and it came out of these fall downs in order to give us great lessons. Right? So they're just mistakes of great souls are simply mistakes. They are not meant to be taken in any other way. They're not meant to be imitated. For example, another story I remember doing that, and I forget which canto it was, the story of Brahma running after his daughter, right? And when he was doing that, the sons of Marichi, who saw that, they started laughing at Brahma. And for that, they got a heavy reaction. They actually became the 6 sons of Devaki, who were killed by the Kamsa. But Marichi and the other sages instead offered prayers to Lord Krishna to protect Brahma. And so, in other words, we should see these mistakes of great souls as mistakes, but nothing beyond it. We should not think of Vyasadeva as an ordinary person because he was bewildered, or we should not see Pariksit Maharaj or any other great soul. Even Bharat Maharaj is a story of his fall down with when he got attached to a deer. But we should not take that in this way, because it's simply meant to be a mistake. In fact, it doesn't affect these great souls at all. In fact, Brahma, right after this incident, he went on to creating this material world, so as though nothing happened, right? In fact, when he was running after his daughter, then it is said that he ran after past all the hermitages of the sages, because Krishna wanted to teach the sages that don't be complacent. Don't be complacent. It can happen to anyone. If the great Brahma it can happen to him. It can happen to you and to all of us. So we should be very careful. I remember this one time when Prabhupada, he told his disciples that how the problem, he said, with all of you is that you're not afraid of Maya enough. And he said that how he would always pray to Krishna to protect him from Maya. So these are very nice lessons, that how we can learn from these mistakes, and how these mistakes are meant to be taken only as mistakes. And we should not think of these in anything beyond that, because these great souls are committing these mistakes for our purpose, for us to learn. And actually, it doesn't affect them. So now, we'll continue with our story in the next slide of how Narad Muni, when the sages left the ashram after the rainy season was over, what happened? And I'll read a few verses from the Prabhupada's Bhagavatam, where Narad Muni says, "I was the only son of my mother, who was not only a simple woman, but a maidservant as well. Since I was her only offspring, she had no other alternative for protection. She bound me with a tie of affection. She wanted to look after my maintenance properly, but because she was not independent, she was not able to do anything for me. The world is under the full control of the Supreme Lord. Therefore, everyone is like a wooden doll in the hands of a puppet master. When I was a mere child of 5 years, I lived in a Brahmana school. I was dependent on my mother's affection and had no experience of different lands. Once upon a time, my poor mother, when going out one night to milk a cow, was bitten on the leg by a serpent, influenced by a supreme time. I took this as a special mercy of the Lord, who always desires benediction for his devotees. And so thinking, I started for the north." So in this way, Narad Muni explains his story of how his mother died when she was bitten by a snake, and how due to his mother, he's feeling very kind of grateful to his mother, because due to his mother, he also received a wonderful association of the great sages, which is a very important point. You know how giving our children the right association when they're growing up, it has very, very lasting effect, as we see in the story of Narad Muni, how even at this time when he was associating with them, and when they left, he had already come to the stage of bhava. Just by being in the association of such great souls, eating their remnants and serving them, he was able to quickly advance, very, very quickly. So now so Prabhupada, in his purports, he talks about how the death of his mother was inspired by Krishna, how the child, so that Narad Muni could take full shelter of Krishna. And because of the training that he received from the sages, Narad Muni himself could see it as coming from Krishna. Krishna is not doing injustice to him, so he did not blame Krishna for this, but instead took shelter of him. So again, we can do some comparisons here with other stories where great devotees see it. Some difficulty comes in their life, and they see it as the plan of the Lord. And of course, Pariksit Maharaj is a great example here. And if you want to make a contrast, and you in the story of Chitraketu, his queen Krita Duty, when Chitraketu and Krita Duty lost their only son, who came after a great austerity, then Krita Duty, out of real frustration, she blasphemed the Lord and called him very, very cruel. And she continues to do that for several verses. So we see a lot of from a lot of people, when difficulty comes, then we end up blaming God. If we don't end up blaming God, then we start blaming somebody else. But what we learn here is that, like Narada Muni, we just have to see it as our own karma, as something that is not only a karma, but as the mercy of the Lord, as something that's coming from the Lord. So now we're going to talk about another deep point, which is like in our next slide, which is like how Krishna deals with his pure devotees in two ways. One, by giving away, by giving, and the second is by taking it away. Now we see in the story of Dhruva, Prahlad, Dhruva and Prahlad, we see how Krishna gave. He gave. He gave Dhruva and Prahlad the entire kingdom, even though they didn't want to rule it. And Krishna gave. Why? Because they knew they would not misuse it. However, in some cases, Krishna takes it away. Now, that's an interesting point, because, for example, in the story of Bali Maharaj, Bali Maharaj prided himself to be a great donor, right? He was very, very charitable. But Krishna taught him a lesson by taking away everything. So Krishna will do things like that. He will only do those things when it's beneficial for that devotee. Where it's beneficial for the devotee. For example, he took away from the Pandavas, right? From Kunti and from Kubja. For Kubja, he gave, right? So like that, we have so many examples. How he took everything away from the Pandavas, the entire kingdom. And of course, later on, they got it back. And similar with Kunti, she went through so many difficulties. So Krishna will go back and forth in terms of he'll give, he'll take away. And the whole purpose in all this is to simply glorify his devotees, right? Why is he doing that? He wants to glorify his devotees. And he wants to bring them closer to him. So by hearing from these great stories, we become very, very inspired. We become inspired, and we understand that Krishna, whatever happens in a devotee's life, is actually orchestrated by the Lord. So the real maturity is to see reverses as opportunities. And this actually comes by the association of devotees. How did Narada Muni get this this vision, this idea, this realization? Is through the association of these great souls. Okay? So in all these stories, we see the devotees taking these as a special privilege, as a blessing of the Lord. Especially Dhruva's story, most children know. That's a very wonderful example to give how Suniti, his mother, trained Dhruva to see the reverses that he was facing as something, as a mercy of the Lord, and to take it as an opportunity to surrender to him. So and so this way we will move on to the story where Narada Muni continues to explain what happened after he left. He actually, when his mother dies, he just walks out. Why? Without looking back. He sees that as a great opportunity, and for him to, advance spiritually, something that's coming from Krishna. And so he leaves. And there's a beautiful explanation of where he goes. He just travels and travels. He goes through many cities, flourishing cities, towns, villages, farms, mines, agricultural lands. Beautiful description of all those places. And then he passed through hills and mountains and full of reservoirs of various minerals like gold, copper, silver. And then he also passed through beautiful, deep and dangerous forests where there was dangerous animals and foxes and snakes and owls and jackals. So in this way, it becomes a fascinating tale for our children. And then he becomes very, very tired. And he, both bodily and mentally, he becomes very tired, and he becomes thirsty and hungry. So he takes a bath in a river lake, and he drinks the water, and he sits under a banyan tree. And when he sits under the shadow of a banyan tree, then he starts practicing what he has learned from these great souls, these sages at the ashram. And he starts meditating on the super soul within. And as soon as he starts meditating, then immediately Krishna comes within the lotus of his heart, right? On the lotus of his heart. And he started experiencing symptoms of bhava, which is always begins with tears coming from his eyes. And of course, other symptoms of ecstatic symptoms appeared on his body. And at that time, it mentions how Narada Muni is, all his senses become alive, right? So he's overcome with bhava, with tears, and this, all his senses become alive. And the way it's explained very nicely by Srila Prabhupada, that how each sense was separately focusing on Krishna. The eyes were seeing Krishna, the ears were focusing on his flute or ankle bells, his sense of touch was experiencing the touch of Krishna. So in other words, when one comes in contact with Krishna's form, that form can satisfy all our senses. So in our material conditional life, all our senses are actually said they are all sleeping. Only when we come in contact with Krishna, then the senses actually become alive. So in the stage of bhava, what happens is that all these senses are actually separately relishing Krishna, observing Krishna. So in the purport of text 16, Prabhupada discusses, gives all the 9 stages of bhakti, very, very, very simple and very, very clear way of how Narada Muni went through these stages of bhakti. And it becomes a great way to teach our children. So like this. And then what happens is Narada Muni suddenly loses that form. He's not able to see that form, which he was he had become very, very attached, and he lost vision of that beautiful form of the Lord. So, so in this way, he becomes very, very perturbed, and he's looking for that form everywhere, and he tries to see that form everywhere. And then when the Lord sees that effort and that anxiety in Narada Muni, he takes compassion and he starts speaking. Now, as Prabhupada mentions how Narada Muni, when he was trying to see that form again, he was trying to see it in the mechanical process of Ashtanga Yoga that he learned from the great sages. And he tried to apply that, but that same process did not work. Right? Why? Because Krishna's mercy was not there. Only when Krishna decided to give Dhruva his mercy, then Dhruva was able to not see the Lord again, but only hear. Now you see in other stories how Dhruva, Krishna appeared within his heart, and then suddenly Krishna disappeared from his heart, but then he came right in front of him, face to face. He was able to see Lord Narayan. But in this case, Krishna decided to disappear and not come back in a visual form, but rather in the audio form, through the power of sound. Now, the power of sound and the power of form is the same, but yet he's teaching a lesson that we're going to understand in this as we as we continue in the story, that Krishna wanted to make a point that Narada Muni was not purified enough to see him face to face. Now, seeing Krishna face to face is not an ordinary thing. It comes at the final stage where a devotee has completely reached the stage of prema. So what he's saying that Narada Muni his devotional life is still in its infancy, and he needs to come to the youthful stage where he can actually mature more. So he can mature in that. So in other words, Narad Muni is actually on the bhava stage, which is the beginning stage of prema, and very soon he will be on the very topmost platform. And so Krishna is creating that hankering in him, that to give him that hankering, because having seen the form of the Lord once, the devotee always hankers for that form again and again. And you may remember the story of Pariksit Maharaj. He saw the form of the Lord when he was in the womb of his mother, when the Lord had entered the womb to save him from the Mamastra, and then he disappeared. And all his life, Pariksit Maharaj was looking for that form everywhere, because that's the nature of seeing the Lord. When one sees the Lord, one can never ever forget that. So he created that hankering in Narad Muni, where he's always he when he took his another life of Narad Muni, he was constantly, you know, in other words, when he came out of that trance, and he started, applying that instruction of Krishna and engaging in, glorifying and chanting the Lord's name, to the extent where he actually, whenever he would chant, the form of the Lord would appear on the lotus of his heart again and again. So Prabhupada talks about, this separation of devotees from Krishna, the pure devotees from Krishna, how wonderful it is, and how when one enters one of the six loving exchanges with Krishna, then actually that person actually starts missing Krishna, right? Right now we have forgotten our relationship with Krishna, so we cannot understand these topics, and we can faintly appreciate it. But it's amazing how just in Canto 1, how we will hear about Narad is feeling separation from the Lord when the Lord disappeared. How later on in chapter, I think it's 15, where the Pandavas are feeling separation. Yudhishthira Maharaj is feeling separation from the Lord. So one can be in any one of these, loving exchanges, and one feels, and one can understand what this separation means. So in this way, of course, we know about the gopis feeling separation from Krishna, even though Krishna was right in front of them. Still, they were feeling separation during the time they were even with Krishna. So in this way, we can understand a little bit about the love in the heart of a devotee, how it's measured by the feelings of separation he has in his heart. So now the Lord speaks to Narad Muni and tells him the reason why in this lifetime you will not be able to see him, that I've already explained in summary. And so now the Narad Muni is going to he's going to describe how when he left his former body, he went into the body of Mahavishnu along with all the other sages. Okay, so I'll read you this text 30. So after 4,300,000,000 solar years, when Brahma awoke to create again by the will of the Lord, all the rishis like Marichi, Angira, Atri, and so on were created from the transcendental body of the Lord, and I also appeared along with them. So Narad Muni, he appears by the mercy of the Lord himself. It appears that he is the son of Lord Brahma, but in reality, he appears from the Lord himself. Actually, in the third canto, chapter 12, his birth will be described during the description of creation. So in other words, Narad Muni is not like Marichi and other munis with material bodies, because he's not influenced by karma. He's not a jnani like the Kumaras. He has a spiritual body, and he does not enter the womb of a mother. He's like a liberated spaceman. He can go anywhere he wants to within the material and spiritual worlds. And we hear time and again, we hear him going to the demons' places and also to all the great devotees, visiting the house of the Pandavas. So in this way, in every canto, we see Narad Muni come practically in every episode. He has that much freedom and independence, right? And what is he doing? He's always engaging in singing Krishna's glories. And it is said that anybody who's singing and glorifying Krishna, in that place Narada Muni will come. And he will play his veena, which is a gift from the Lord. So he's repaying the obligation that he feels that of this gift that Krishna gives him, right? So, so in this way, I think this way, actually the chapter ends here, and in the last slide, I talk about about the 9 stages of bhakti, which is kind of nice to discuss in the end, because then we can trace Narad Muni's journey nicely of how he went through all these stages. Now, Prabhupada explains in the purport, a very short purport, but very interesting purport of how he says how the first stage is called Shraddha, where one starts liking the Lord, right? And that happened for Narad Muni when he was in the ashram, when he was first encountered the sages. And in order to, and then comes sadhu sangha, which is association of the devotees, and how when one associates with the devotees, one starts following the 4 regulative principles, right? And that's called bhajan kriya, takes initiation, and by doing that, one gets rid of all the unwanted things in our heart, which is called anartha nirviti, right? And this is what happened with Narad Muni. And then one starts developing nishtha, which is steadiness in spiritual life, then ruchi, which is attraction, a taste of Krishna consciousness, and asakti would be attraction, further attachment, stronger attachment, and bhava is further attachment, and where one exhibits emotions, the symptoms of ecstasy, and of course prema is the purest love of God. So in this way, we can help our children understand a little bit on this topic. Okay, so thank you very much. Now we'll hear from Sri Radhika Mataji about how the children can do these very nice activities on this chapter. Radhika?
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Mataji, for that nice summary. Not just a summary, actually, a very detailed explanation of the chapter. Okay, I'm just going to start my presentation. So after we have hopefully read the purports in advance for discussion with the children, just 1 second. And then we are ready to discuss with the children. We read the translations of the entire chapter with our child or children, and then we're ready to move on to the Srimad-Bhagavatam Comprehensive Guide for Young Readers. But before we go to chapter 6, I wanted to share from chapter 2. We had a parent, his name is Adi Kavi Prabhu, and he lives in Glasgow, Scotland. And he has been joining our presentations every week and felt very inspired, so took up teaching from the Bhagavatam, and they're currently on chapter 3 from the book, but they wanted to, they shared with me a puppet show, and it's exactly this puppet show from the book in chapter. And his children are Hari Darshan, who's 9, and Pranati, who's 6. And you can see how nicely they've brought the book into action. Okay. This is perfect questions, perfect answers. They've made a little puppet theater at home.
Many years ago, the sages of Naimisharanya forest asked the great and powerful Sethruta Goswami what the people of Kali Yuga should do to become fully happy in their hearts. Sutta Goswami gave such a wonderful answer to the sages that it became famous for all time. Do you want to know what Sutta Goswami said? Then please listen closely to our play to hear the answer.
So it's very nice, but it's
Welcome to our show.
Won't have time to show you everything, but just wanted to thank Adi Kavi Prabhu and encourage any of you that are reading the book. Please share your pictures and your feedback with us. So let's begin. Chapter 6, conversation between Narada and Vyasadeva. So you can see here in Sunday school, I'm exactly on this chapter on the story summary. And the younger ones are coloring while the older ones with me are reading aloud the story summary, which is written in a very nice conversational manner. One time, though my mother went out at night to milk a cow and was bitten on the leg by a deadly serpent, she left her body. I saw this as Krishna's mercy, as he always wants the best for his devotees. Then I began to travel north and saw different lands I had never seen before. I passed through cities, towns, villages, farms, mines, valleys, flower garlands, and forests. Sometimes I came across places that were fit for heavenly beings. And then sometimes, it goes on to say how he met snakes and owls and jackals. And there's a nice activity in the book where we make animal masks. And the way I read the story summary with the children was with our animal masks, so bringing the story summary to life. And it goes on, and again here the children are working on exactly this section. Want to share Rinda and Lali's.
Hare Krishna, everybody.
Hare Krishna, everybody.
This is Vrinda and
Lali.
and
Namaste.
a kiss from me to you. Won't you say you love me too? I thought of my mummy all the time while I was in the Brahmin school. That's where I was while she was in her master's house. I love you, you love me.
So it's been really nicely done where, she's put in rhymes in between, and the entire story summary is presented in a friendly manner. As we move on in the book, it summarizes the messages from verses and also kind of clubs them together. And then a very nice section that I love is understanding the story, where there are multiple choice questions for children to understand the flow, details that are presented. Higher thinking questions, several ways to do these. I usually take notes of these higher thinking questions. So for instance, this one says, Narada mentioned in verse 1628 that he left his material body of 5 elements. What are those elements? So when I'm preparing for the discussion, I've already gone through the guidebook and I've noted down these higher thinking questions in the margin in my Bhagavatam book. So when I'm reading verse 28 with the children, I'm asking them these thoughtful questions. Or also, I have assigned them for older children where, their assignment for the day, their writing for the day is to come up with the answer to this. Also done it through Google Classroom, where I'll put it on the classroom and they need to go into the pulpit, they need to read the pulpit and then answer and post their question. And, because Google Classroom has that feature where students can look at each other's reply, it sometimes motivates them to, oh, he's already turned it in. This is one that I personally did not do in class. So as I said, there are lots of activities and you pick and choose what you would like to do, but it's a really nice one. It's a mural depicting Narada Muni's life. And after reading about Narada Muni's life, divide the children into smaller groups, preferably each group has 10 to 3. And then each group is responsible for depicting one event in Narada Muni's life, and then put it all together in chronological order in a mural. And then the scenes have been listed. Now, we really enjoyed this one. We took the tubes of paper towels. So you can see that long tube. One of my sons did not want to cut it, so he wanted a really tall Narada Muni. But most children, I gave them half the tube of the paper towel. And then we made Narada Muni. And then the book says, walk him through each scene of his life, retelling his story as he moves along. I did that. As you can see, Narada Muni's coming together. I printed out for each child on cardstock paper a veena and attached the veena to Narada Muni and googly eyes. And they even have a top knot for him. And here's another child. We did our puppet show. We walked Narada Muni through his entire life with this with puppets. Also a suggestion to design a poster for a theater production. So you can see how art and creativity and writing and grammar and everything can be taught from this chapter. Theatrical activity of enacting the full pastime from chapter 4 through 6. And then this is a nice one where you create animal masks of all the animals that he may have seen in the forest as he traveled north, and then sometimes making it scary. We did the whole story summary like this. So here's one child making looks like a raccoon mask. This is a bird mask. Bird and a bear. Okay, so bear. And we have frogs and bunnies, and I don't know exactly what animal this is, but we designed something. And it just really brought life, it makes Bhagavatam so interesting and so relatable for children. Very nice activity. There are 2 of these. Critical thinking activity to bring out the spiritual investigator in you. So thinking about Narada Muni's spiritual journey and writing the answers. For younger children, you can have them just draw, illustrate, stick figures. And for older children, actually write down what inspired Narada Muni, who influenced him, what were the challenges he had to deal with, really thoughtful questions. And then you put it in a drawing or a depiction or a cartoon form. And here's one of the younger children that did this. And you can see it's not very legible for us, perhaps, but it really helped him consider the story deeply. And then the book walks you to my spiritual journey. So now let's think about myself. How did I become a devotee? And what makes you want to be a devotee? And who influences you? And do you have any challenges? And what do you see yourself doing in the future? And then depicting your own spiritual journey. And here's again a younger child from my class that drew this, showing his journey. And to him, this makes total sense. Like he's shown him through different stages of life. You can see he's holding a walking cane, and in this he's in his mommy's womb. So between birth and death, to him it makes total sense. He's saying Hari Bol, but perhaps we don't understand it so much. He's depicted his spiritual journey. So here you can see the children are exactly on this page in my Sunday school. They are drawing. This is probably the picture that I took from Sunday school. This was a nice one where she drew quite a bit. So some of them are really into graphic novels and comics, and so they're like comic strips here. Narada Muni quiz. Now that you know everything about Narada Muni's life, it's quiz time. So write 10-question quiz as contained in the chapters 4 to 6, and then ask a partner to, or quiz, give the quiz to a partner and see how they do. Question time. Think of 5 questions you would like to ask Narada Muni, and then answer them the way Narada Muni would answer them. A debate on reincarnation, and we did this again during our discussion, directly from Prabhupada's Bhagavatam. So I take some of the activities and I do them during our discussion time rather than during the time that we're actually reading from this book. And this activity requires some research and arguments for and against reincarnation. And one side is supporting reincarnation and the other is against it. And then, the 2 sides really enjoy. Debates are always fun. Making a book on Narada Muni's past life. So here they're asked to create a title, and then in each page of the book include a caption describing each part of Narada Muni's life, and draw pictures and have some words to describe what's going on. Adjectives as well as keywords. So learning not only spellings, but also vocabulary. So learning what these words mean. using a dictionary and nice crossword. A couple examples from my students where they've completed the crossword. Oh, and this is a really nice song. And we again did this with our Narada Muni puppets.
Narada Muni, Krishna's devotee, who travels through the universes, chanting sweetly. One lifetime ago, he was a simple servant boy, serving great devotees with humility and joy. One night, his poor mother went outside to milk the cow, but on her way home, a serpent bit her leg, and down she fell. What was our young boy all alone now supposed to do? While he walked all day and thought of Krishna, that was all he knew. Through great cities, tiny towns, farmlands and beautiful gardens, over hills and mountains filled with gold in many different lands. He passed lotus ponds with bees and singing birds high in the sky, and through dangerous dark forests where both owls and jackals cry. Feeling tired and hungry, he sat down under a banyan tree. Then Krishna appeared within his heart and told him, "Think of me." As lightning struck, he met with death and took his next body. Now we know him by the name Narada Muni. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Narada Muni.
Some of those sulky faces, when we were doing this before I filmed it, they were being a little rough with their Narada Muni puppets, and they were just being kids. And, Narada Muni was twirling in the air, so I had to sober them down. So some of them are a little still-faced during the puppet show. You can see they're not so happy. And here's when I did the same song in the classroom in Sunday school. Did a little song with the song. Nice to have answers. Chapter. You can order the books if you don't already have them. Available via Amazon in the UK or the US. Golden Age Media in India. And that brings me to the end of my presentation. So we are now open to questions, and you are welcome to raise your hand, and I will call on you to unmute yourself if you would like that, and just ask your question directly. You can turn on your video if you feel comfortable with that. But if you prefer that I ask your question, we can do that as well. So let me just allow participants to unmute. Okay. Our first question is going to be from Anjali Agarwal Mataji.
Hare Krishna, Mataji, Dandavat Pranam.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Mataji. Mataji, it was a very nice class. And I just wanted to ask, I have a 4-year-old son, and he wants, if I haven't told him the story about Narad Muni, and if I tell him that his mother was bitten by a snake, he already gets very scared कि कोई die हो जाएगा, कैसे होता है, अच्छा फिर ऐसे सब कोई die हो. So how will he feel about it? Will it be okay to share with him?
Yes, it's okay, because initially they'll go through that, but once they start understanding that this is natural, that people, like Radhika Mataji is showing, when they did that activity of their own personal journey, that little child is showing how he's getting older and older. Remember that drawing that she was showing? And then in the end, he became old and he had a walking stick, and eventually he's going to die, right? So as the children learn this journey that we are all going to go through, this eventually getting older and dying, the child will learn how to take it as a fact of life, and he's not going to get disturbed. So I wouldn't stop giving these things to the child, these stories to the child, and explain the child that actually, and you can explain, because if you have somebody in the family who was older and who may have left his body or her body, then that becomes relatable to the child. You may have, you may not have any person in the family who passed away, but that through that the child understands that, okay, well, they have gone to another place, or to Krishna, to meet him, or to another body, like that. So it is not harmful to the child. It doesn't put him so much in anxiety, just initially, until it becomes a part of his life, you know because the whole Bhagavatam is all about that. Is about this life, birth, death, old age, and disease. But the way Bhagavatam puts it is in a very nice perspective, by giving, devotees have, they have some positiveness in their life, because we know there's something to look forward to. But death for a non-devotee is very, very fearsome, because what is there to look forward to except separation from the things you're attached to, right? If people are thinking that this is it, there's no life after this, it's a very horrible and fearful situation. So we have to have the confidence that what we're giving them is not negative, but rather it's actually very positive. It's actually very good for them to know and to look forward to, to their own life in future, whatever it might be. It's always going to be better. And also they develop a sense of purpose, why for the present life, they have a sense of purpose. I'm here to love Krishna. I'm here to love my family. Why? Because we are all devotees of Krishna, like that. Okay. Mm-hmm. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Anjali Mataji. I'm going to invite Geeta Gokhale Mataji to ask the question now.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you, Mataji. Hare Krishna, Mataji. Dandavat Pranam.
Hare Krishna.
Mataji, I was reading the second chapter of first canto with my students last week, and so I have a question from the second chapter actually.
Okay.
So there are different type of incarnations that are being discussed, like Yuga Avatar, Manvantar Avatar, and Leela Avatar. So these are difficult concepts for children. So how do I explain this to children? And is it okay if I can skip some of them?
Oh, you mean some of the avatars, skip some of these avatars, like not even talk about them? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, you can pick out the ones that you want to talk about and skip the others. That's all right. They don't, some of them are very difficult, and maybe too much information without really many stories in there. All these incarnations, pretty much all of them have been discussed somewhere in the Bhagavatam, in other cantos, and where you get a little bit more of those stories. And of course, they are also given in the guidebook. That's where you have this big section on elaboration of some of these incarnations. However, it's not necessary for the child to go through every one of them. It's perfectly okay to skip some. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Geeta Mataji. Our next question is going to be from my dear friend Atulya Mataji from Boston.
Hare Krishna Mataji. Thank you very much. Wonderful summary of the chapter and a lot of resources Sri Radhika Mataji you shared. So I'm in a little bit of anxiety. I plan to have like about 20 kids from all ages, maybe from age 4 or 5 onwards till 13, 14. So how would I have one class and try to give different activities to the different ages, and that too on Zoom? Any ideas you may like to share, Mataji?
Well, I'm sure Sri Radhika will want to add to what I say, because she's got a lot of experience of teaching Sunday school children. But I think to combine a 4-year-old with a 13-year-old, that is very challenging. So what I would suggest is at least to make 2 groups rather than just one group, where you can divide according to age, and then there's not such a big gap between the 4-year-old and 5-year-old and 13-year-old, 10-year-old. So that would be ideal if you can find another teacher and you can have 2 groups. That's one of the first things that is coming to my mind. And and then when you have these two groups, then you'll be better able to teach according to their level, to what they can assimilate. Because I've seen that like an 8-year-old to a 13-year-old, it's not difficult to have them together, but
Mhm.
have another group with 4 to 8 or 4 to, like that. Radhika, did you want to add something?
So my suggestion would be to start the class together with all your 20 students, and you provide, like the PowerPoint that Mataji shared on the chapter. And then after you've shown the PowerPoint and the pictures are capturing all ages, after that you break out into 2 breakout rooms in Zoom. And my suggestion would be your amazing 10-year-old daughter, Radha, can take care of the 4 to the 7-year-olds, and you give her these activities, and she for the 4 to 7, typically on Zoom, like I teach homeschool co-op classes, I always ask the mother to sit or the father to sit with the child. It's just for them to do activities by themselves. So if it's a student and child group for the 4 to 7, then Radha can just facilitate, as your teacher's assistant in that breakout room. And then you are in the other breakout room, which is the 8 to the 13. And then you guys can actually read the story summary. You can do the higher order thinking questions and all of that, and then come back together as a group at the end, to end the class. That would be my suggestion.
Great. That sounds really good.
Yes, I think that's a great idea, what she suggested. And I agree. I mean, your daughter Radha can definitely do the children's part, the younger children's part. And that will be very good for her, very nice for her.
That's a wonderful suggestion. Thank you, Aruda Mataji and Sri Radhika.
Haribo. Okay. Amritanam, Mataji, would you like to ask your question next?
Hare Krishna Mataji. Yeah, I just wanted to ask, thank you for the beautiful class. And is there a way we can get these presentations which you show during the class? Because the way it is made, with the pictorial representation, it's really interesting for the kids to see it and listen.
Yes, definitely I can share that.
Thank you, Mataji.
Yes.
So if you'd like to write to me, va@iscon@gmail.com, and I'm putting that in the chat.
Okay.
So that's my email, and I can send you the presentation.
Thank you, Mataji. Yes.
Mataji.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Archana Mataji, would you like to?
Mommy, my lunch is full.
Sorry.
No problem. We're happy to have children on. Archana Mataji.
Hare Krishna Mataji. Thank you as always for the wonderful session. This is one thing I look forward to every Saturday morning these days. Mataji, my question is the pastime that you mentioned about Narada's previous life, even before becoming a maidservant's son. Is that also in Srimad-Bhagavatam somewhere?
Yes, I believe it's in Canto 7, chapter 15, and verse, I can't remember the verse, but it is there, where he gives his own story of how he became a Gandharva. Initially, he became a Gandharva, yes. And then he was, yes, it is there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Another follow-up question would be, so in the verse 31, Srila Prabhupada writes how even other rishis like Namarichi and Darshanaka Sanatana, they're all authorities of different aspects of the transcendental knowledge, like the fruitive work and everything. So how do we, if there is a debate on why we have to follow Narada Muni or not all of other sages, how do we actually understand this from how do we convince or just clarify on this point?
Yeah.
Why Narada Muni and why not others? Yeah.
Yeah, I believe there's 6 systems of philosophies, and each one has their teacher But the reason why we follow Narada Muni is because it's the devotional path. And this is what the message that Srimad-Bhagavatam is giving is the topmost platform of devotional path in comparison with other paths, in comparison with the Jnana path and so all these paths, the yoga path, the mystic yoga path, it stands above all these different other types of paths. And therefore, by reading Srimad Bhagavatam, we get a sense of why this is more important than the other paths. In other words, in Bhagavatam, there's description of the other paths, right? For example, Canto 3 talks about so much about Ashtanga Yoga. Kapil Muni talks to his mother about the Ashtanga process. But the whole point of putting all the other systems there is simply to make the stronger point how the Bhakti path is the highest. You see? That's why we are studying Bhagavatam, to get that point across, You don't need to go through these other philosophies with the children, That requires a lot of scholarly study, and children don't need to at this point. That will come, when you're reading Bhagavatam, those philosophies do come. Prabhupada mentions that again and again, how, the other paths are, atheistic and impersonalistic and speculative. I mean, he makes that point again and again. So without really elaborating what these, but you can study that. You can find somewhere, where you can study a summary of it for each of the different teachers and their philosophies. But I don't think it's necessary at this point for our children to go into that. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Mataji.
You've been joining us very regularly, and it's very inspiring for us to continue these. So really appreciate your participation. And we also have Ankur Prabhu, Delhi, a wonderful dad that has been teaching from the books and sharing that it's working out really well for him. So we're very grateful. Ankur Prabhu, you can go ahead and ask your question now.
Right. Thank you, Mataji. Thank you for such a wonderful session and regular guidance. Mataji, I have a very specific question. I've heard that from some devotees that at the initial age, like my daughter is of 6 years age, so at this age, we should not deliver philosophy, as in if we have to teach them Bhagavad Gita, so we should prefer make them learn the verses rather than getting into the meaning of it. Even if we have to share the meaning, so just avoid sharing meaning and so at what age, so what is your opinion here, and at what age in that case we should start sharing philosophy? And specifically when it comes to Bhagavatam, so Bhagavatam is story plus philosophy, story plus philosophy. So in any case, we are delivering philosophy at that age. So please guide me. How do I take that thing?
Mm-hmm. So there's two things I think you're asking is that about shlokas, how to teach them shlokas, whether they should learn the translations as well as the Sanskrit. If I'm right, and then secondly, you want to know whether they should be given philosophy. So in terms of philosophy, definitely we should give them, because that's and that's why we've made it really simple through these guidebooks, where you have a very simple summary, a very well written, where the child can understand the chapter just through the hearing from that summary. So that becomes easy. And also, if you were to just sit with the child and if the child is very young and show the child pictures in the Bhagavatam book, then you can elaborate the philosophy just by showing the picture. So that is important, even at that age, is for the child to understand what's happening and why it's happening to the extent that he can grasp. And regarding the shlokas, you can teach them how to recite shlokas. It's nice because an age where memory is very, very sharp at this age, very sharp. So you can do that. And in terms of translations, I did was that instead of doing word to word from that from the book, rather you can paraphrase it. In other words, make it simpler, where the child understands a little bit, and with actions. Again, Sri Radhika may have more experience on that. I can add to it if she.
Definitely, I would like to hear that also, in case Sri Radhika Mataji has something to add on.
Haribo.
Really nothing to add. You know, I've been following Mataji's system. So ever since my kids were really little, you know, we've been doing we've been doing philosophy from the Bhagavatam. So not from the Bhagavad Gita, no, because it's not in story format. And this was, you know, Mataji's training to me. So I just followed it and it's worked really well. And yes, at a younger age, you know, it's the excitement and the animation of the parent that gets them excited about philosophy. And you know, I can tell just from the energy that you have, Ankur Prabhu, that I'm sure you're really good at that. So nothing to add.
Thank you so much for the guidance. Actually, learning the verses is not a challenge at all because she goes to Vyasadeva Vedic school. So ISKCON Rohini is taking care of that school. So they're learning verses there. So like right now they're learning chapter 15 Bhagavad Gita. So they are on 12th verse now.
Wow.
So 12th they have done. Kacha Paga jaisa bhi kiya, but she is done. So 20 plus verses she remembers right now, and that's not a challenge at all. Just the meaning part, I wanted to understand. Shall we share the meanings at this stage or not? That's it.
Yeah, I think we don't want them just to turn into parrots, you know, where they're just memorizing the shloka. Some essence of the meaning is nice because some idea, and the best way to also is through action, you know, where through that verse one can actually act it out, and then it becomes easier to remember what it means, to actually devise different actions explaining what the verse means. So if you can become creative in that respect, it becomes easier. And regarding philosophy, I do want to add that it's very important philosophy to our children early on because it increases their capacity to understand things. As they grow, the capacity for digesting knowledge, philosophy, it's just like amazing. You know, when they get to be like 10 years old, they'll be speaking like, you know, their realizations become so deep, and you wonder whether it's a child or an adult. But it's done in such a nice, innocent way that is very appealing. You know, it's very appealing. So you don't want to shy from philosophy for our children. To whatever capacity they can take, you just give it to them.
Sure. Thank you so much, Mataji. Then open up. Hare Krishna.
Oops, sorry. Thank you, Ankur Prabhu. I realized I was talking and I was muted. Shamini Mataji from Iowa, well known to Arudha Mataji and myself. Please ask your question.
Thank you, Mataji, for the wonderful class. And I really want to thank Sri Radhika Mataji because the way she shows the activities, we have been able to do some of them from the first chapter. You know, I would surely like to share the pictures with you, Mataji, sometime.
Wonderful.
Yeah, so that's been going on well. But one question I have, because this Bhagavatam study that we started, you know, this is like kids who are involved. They are very, very new. They don't know much about Krishna consciousness or anything. So how do you tell them about Prabhupada, or if you want to give some examples? So I had a question in that manner, you know, how do you explain to them, you know, like today, Mataji, Arudha Mataji, you said, you know, you can give an example of Prabhupada, but how do you tell them about Prabhupada, because they don't even know much, and how would they understand, like how to approach?
Mm-hmm. Well, just like Krishna is within our hearts. We are naturally Krishna conscious. We may be even in Maya, but we are naturally, it's already in us. In the same way, these great souls, they are, you know, as soon as we hear about them, you know, we can actually, it becomes a revelation. In other words, I've noticed in my own journey with children, you know, I was doing the Sunday school in my own city, Boise, and most of these children were coming from non-devotional families initially. And I would teach them everything, you know, from Bhagavatam and about Srila Prabhupada, and they became very, very devoted to Prabhupada. So you just have to begin and just tell them who Prabhupada is. You don't have to worry. Sometimes we get worried about, you know, okay, why should I tell about my guru to them? You know, how are they going to feel? Or how are the parents going to take? No, this is this is natural to us. Just like we want to hear about Krishna is natural, the same way it's natural for us to hear about great souls, So, and everything takes care of itself. When the parents see the children so alive and so, inspired, they also start becoming inspired, So just tell them, at that point, just tell them about Prabhupada, who he is and what he did. Even if you tell them a little bit, you can't give the whole story, that's good enough. Okay.
I have something to add. So if you're using, the 2-volume version, then the second volume of Canto 1, but if you're using the 1-volume version, which is both combined, Mataji at the end of the first canto basically has a whole chapter on Srila Prabhupada, our ever well-wisher. And I really enjoyed this chapter with the children. This is a really nice way to teach children about Srila Prabhupada. So Bhagavatam only has 19 chapters, but Mataji has added a 20th chapter to teach about Prabhupada. And it's got these nice activities and interview time and meditation prayers and a Prabhupada quiz and a bookmark and cooking, Prabhupada's recipes and an acrostic poem and a word search. And it's got a poem on Srila Prabhupada. I mean, I just loved this chapter. And I taught, about Srila Prabhupada to very new kids. So if you have the, second volume, you can use that.
Yeah. So I just want to point out that all these activities have been contributed by different mothers around the world. And they have sent me these wonderful activities that we have put in the book. So all glories to them.
Thank you for compiling it all. And editing. And I mean, it's Mataji says it as if, everybody just contribute, but she puts in a lot of work into these books. Our next question is from Achintya Priya Mataji from Orissa. She is just amazing, has beautiful children and just such a soft-hearted mother. And she's here every Saturday. Thank you for inspiring us.
No, Mataji, thank you for your guidance. I wanted to ask about the fact that Narada Muni is mentioned as one of the incarnations and also in Bhagavad Gita, I believe. And how can we explain to the children that he's also an incarnation, but he's also a diva who had many lifetimes?
Okay. Good question. Now, these Narada Muni is one of the Shakti-Avesh avatar of the Lord, which means that he's a jiva, but he's infused by the potency from the Lord for bhakti, for distributing bhakti. Okay, so there's many other Shakti-Avesh avatars. For example, just for your own understanding, there's Prelude Maharaj. He was a Shakti-Avesh. So these personalities are jivas. There's a difference between Shakti-Avesh jiva avatar incarnations versus Vishnu Tattva avatars, right? We understand that. And those different incarnations are listed, as Nrsingadev, Lord Ram, like that. So Shakti-Avesh avatar is a jiva, but very, very empowered by the Lord with a special potency, just like Prelude Maharaj was empowered with a special potency to rule. So he's given an example of the best ruler that anybody can really have, and when we read that section of Prelude Maharaj, it's an inspiration for people who are in any capacity of leadership. They get inspiration, you see. So in this way, we have many, many Shakti-Avesh avatars, like Lord Buddha is also named as a Shakti-Avesh, the Kumaras, like that. So they are jivas. Okay, so they are jivas, but because they are infused by the potency, they become as good as God. But they're not God. They're not Vishnu. Okay.
Hare Krishna, Mataji. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Mataji, I have another question. I think this is more directed to Sri Radhika Mataji. So, I've been reading the homeschooling book like a Bible, and then following all of these lectures. And then since you just mentioned to one of the Prabhus that you started your kids when they were real young, my question would be, how did you strike a balance between following Mataji's principles and not imitating them?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I when I talk to parents that are homeschooling or even just parents that are bringing up children, they look at the products of Arudha Mataji, you know, Gopal Hari Prabhu and Radhikaran Prabhu, and they go, oh my God, you know. So neither we can be like Arudha Mataji, nor are, you know, my children at least are going to come out like that, you know, and being very true and honest to my personality and my time too. I mean, you know, this is probably like 20, 30 years later than when Mataji was homeschooling, or, you know, or 20, you know, 15, 20 years later than she was homeschooling. You know, the whole onset of technology has made such a huge difference. I mean, you know, the smartphones and the smart technologies have made such a huge difference in how education is geared towards. And so I have taken the principles from Arudha Mataji, and I really value those principles, the principle of Bhagavatam-centered education, and, you know, a lifestyle that shows the child how happy I am in Krishna consciousness, you know, that it is so fulfilling for me at a very deep level. And yet the details I very much modify because, you know, I really try to be in touch with my needs and my children's personalities. And, you know, like for instance, shlokas is not something that we lay emphasis on, you know, it's just something that I've discovered over time for many multiple reasons. You know, we read the Bhagavatam, we like to discuss, we do a lot of arts and crafts and activities, and shlokas is, I chose not to, you know, put too much emphasis on it. And stuff like that, you know, I have a great interest in science, in natural, like, you know, I find being out in nature brings chapter 10 of Bhagavad Gita, opulences of the absolute, to life for me, you know. So I really thought about my personality, my nature, my children's personalities, and we are just very true and honest, and we're very satisfied with, you know, not aiming for the stars and not, you know, being happy. I think we just focus on being happy together, enjoying our time together. And so what does it take? You know, personally for me, it took a lot of thought about what are my needs. Does that answer your question?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Thank you.
So we have shining examples before us, and we modify the details.
I think that was a very good answer, Radhika. I think that with the times changing, things have to be adapted, and that is really my whole purpose. When, you know, when I wrote that book, Homeschooling Krishna's Children, I emphasized that point, that I'm laying out the principles, the basic principles, and they're based on the instructions of Srila Prabhupada and what he really desired for children. But then parents and teachers, they will have to adapt it according to their own situation, their own needs, because with, you know, everybody is a personality, is an individual, and they have different interests. Even when we are doing discussion or whatever with them, every parent or teacher comes up with a different type of emphasis that they would want to share. Like Radhika Mataji just said, her emphasis is more science, you know, and for somebody it may be more music, you know, for somebody it may be more art. You see? So you have to see the interest. The idea is that the basic principles are still being followed, what Prabhupada wanted. You know, a child may learn philosophy a lot through music, you know. All the songs of the acharyas, they're non-different from scriptures, you see? So yes, it can be adapted according, but the principles are there, you know. Srimad-Bhagavatam, you know, the home environment, you know, and reaching out to Krishna, you know, sharing Krishna with others, so like that.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have lots of appreciation coming from Prema Ras Prabhu and Vasikeli Radhika Mataji. Thank you so much for your appreciations. And our next question is from my dear friend from Atlanta, Champaklata Sakhi Mataji.
Hare Krishna, Radhika Mataji and Arudha Mataji. Thank you so much for your wonderful guidance and help. Please accept my humble obeisances. Mataji, I have a question. I'm almost done. I think I'm done with second canto with my daughter. We just have to sit and do some activities. But one point which I couldn't understand and she also couldn't understand was, like you just described the incarnations. Krishna is saying that there are different kind of incarnations: yoga, ansha, kala, guna. So that's where she was confused. And since I haven't even studied Bhagavatam, I'm doing it with her. So I would appreciate your help if you can throw a little light on it, because she asked me a couple of times and I didn't have the reply for her.
Yeah. So all the different types of incarnations, they are explained in different sections of the Bhagavatam. So what I would suggest that for right now, you can skip it, move on, and this explanation will come again and again, as she gets older and older. So you don't have to discuss the details for everything in one go. Unless sometimes there's an activity on it, then you can take advantage of it, because then it really makes it simple. But if you don't find an activity and you don't have the resources or the time to get into that, I mean, you can actually research it. You can research it and get all the details. But for me, at this point, to get into it, I don't think we have enough time for all that. So, okay. So, I mean, if I find some explanation in a very simple way, I can send it to you. Okay. Yeah. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Mataji. Any other questions? I'm not seeing anything on Zoom or YouTube. We'll take a couple minutes to see if there are any other questions. In the meantime, we're receiving appreciation. Adi Gorangi Mataji is very grateful, and Amritanam Mataji as well, for the beautiful PowerPoints and discussions. I really want to thank all of you for coming, and enlivening us. Otherwise, if there isn't this Sangha, it doesn't give motivation to do what we're doing. I'll keep Achintya Priya Mataji as well, sending our appreciation. So I'm not seeing any other questions, Mataji. Anything you want to say in closing?
This is wonderful. I feel very, very inspired to be with all of you every week, and knowing that there are so many of you over there who are actually applying these things and trying it out with your children. That's the whole purpose behind it. Behind these classes is to actually inspire you to actually try them with your children, and all the activities that we have in the guidebook have been similarly inspired by parents and teachers who have actually have children, and they have been trying them with their children. So please go ahead, please continue to do that till we meet again next week. Thank you. Hare Krishna, everyone.
Thank you. Hare Krishna. We'll meet next Saturday.